Welcome back to the Journal of Samuel Kelly. In the last episode, Samuel spent some time in Great Britain visiting his relatives near Falmouth. One of his cousins had a boat that was being built, and he invited Samuel to come on as mate in the coastal trade. Samuel obliged, and the two set off for Bristol. After a nearly fatal trek with an inexperienced captain, they arrived at Bristol to find the ship only half done. I hope you enjoy this episode from the Journal of Samuel Kelly. About the beginning of the year 1787, my Uncle W., with whom my sister lived, was so far reduced as to be obliged to break up housekeeping and go to sea again, being now about 70 years of age. He obtained the situation of supercargo to Jamaica. His daughter and my sister were now obliged to go to Liverpool to reside a while with his late wife's friends, he having married there. On our arrival at Liverpool, I found my sister there. I had now much reason to dislike this berth, which brought me in 40 shillings per month, and as I wished to go abroad in the foreign trade, Providence soon prepared me the means. The ship's husband for the 3 Bristol traders here was largely concerned in shipping, who I call Mr. 1010. He had now bought a vessel for the Philadelphia trade, and I was informed that I might have the chief mate's berth if I wished it. I readily embraced the proposal, and as soon as she began to load, I removed my bedding from the brig to the Thetis. The first night I slept on board the vessel, I was much annoyed with a vast number of rats, and was obliged to take my clothes into bed to prevent their being injured, being well acquainted with these animals in different ships, and having had the horn buttons destroyed of my jacket. After taking on board a quantity of fine salt, we leveled it to stow other goods thereon. But on viewing the surface of the salt in the morning, it was marked all over as if sheep had been treading in it all night. After being laden, we sailed for Philadelphia about the 1st of April, 1787. I soon found my captain, though a civil man and an excellent seaman, had nothing more of gentleman about him than what was confined in his clothes. His whole delight was vulgarity in the extreme, and not only associated with the seamen, but played at halfpence with the boys. Nothing particular occurred on our passage out, but experiencing very rough weather until we struck soundings on the American coast about the middle of May following. We now stood in for the land about 30 miles to the southward of the Delaware, when in a fog we threw the lead over and found only 14 fathoms of water, which made us try again, when we found about 8. We immediately tacked and providentially escaped being wrecked on Jink, a teak shoal, but not laid down in our chart, although it lay several miles off the land. In about 2 days more, we got a pilot and entered the Delaware. The land being low towards the sea, the first that appears are the tops of trees, like a fleet of ships. Our pilot was a young man from whom I wished to draw information respecting the shoals in the Delaware Bay, but he gave me to understand that whatever he knew of these things was not to be communicated to a British subject. We had a pleasant run with a fresh breeze up the river, and after passing the towns of Newcastle, Wilmington, and Chester, we arrived at Philadelphia, which extended on a bay in the river, in the shape of a crescent, the length of 2 miles. Having hauled into a wharf, our salt was soon bargained for, and we began to discharge. Having got some lettuces on board, and recollecting that rats were fond of vegetables, I baited the trap with leaves, and caught 11 at once. One evening, sitting alone writing in the cabin, I heard a rat at work in the locker, when having looked therein, I saw a rat with one eye shut, eating the cork of an oil jar. Soon after I heard him again. I therefore called the cabin boy and told him to hold a candle, that I might kill the rat he heard in the locker. And in order to make the boy be more afraid of doing anything amiss, I gave him to understand that I could discover many things, and as a proof of it, that I knew the said rat had but one eye. I then, with a poker, opened the locker and killed the rat, which I told the boy to examine, and he was not a little surprised at finding my report true. I generally endeavored to visit a place of worship on the Sabbath, not only from custom, but in hopes my good deeds would help me finally to heaven. One Sabbath in the morning, I directed my steps to the Episcopal Church, or St. Paul's without a tower. While passing through the churchyard, I met a man with a little girl whose person I had known at Falmouth, and on mentioning my name, he pressed me to dine with him that day. 2 of my sisters had been put to board with his wife's mother at the time of my mother's death, and one of them died there with the smallpox in Falmouth. I found this house well stowed with new mahogany furniture for sale. Even the parlor where we dined was crowded with tables, etc., heaped one on another, and for want of money could make no sale. Tradesmen in general here being obliged to carry on a barter business, which was very unsatisfactory, and therefore my friend had determined to emigrate with his family to Kentucky, a frontier new settlement bordering on the Indian nations, which at this time was draining many inhabitants away from this city. The letters of introductions I had received at Ilfracombe I now presented, and not only procured me a dinner and a genteel family, but also a general invitation. Having delivered our cargo, our vessel was chartered to load mahogany and dyewood for Liverpool. Being now laden, we took on a quantity of dollars privately, as the British agents, for want of procuring bills on England, were obliged to make their returns in dollars. Having obtained a passenger belonging to Glasgow, we sailed from the wharf the beginning of July 1787. The 22nd sounded on the Grand Bank of Newfoundland, hove to and caught 10 codfish. The 23rd found our ship in the midst of vessels fishing at anchor. French ships are not allowed by the British to anchor on the bank. They generally fish driving about, although I have seen them at anchor. After leaving the bank, we discovered a field or island of ice drifting to the southward with the current, and although it was now the month of August, from its vast bulk under water, it is probable it would take many weeks more to dissolve, although apparently a stream of water was now falling from it. It would have been dangerous to have met it during the night. The 10th of August we got to the eastward of Cape Clear, and about the 13th arrived at Liverpool. On my taking leave of our passenger, he made me a present of 2 handsome waistcoat pieces for my attention to him during the passage. He was a martyr to the effects of his former improprieties, and was often obliged to leave his bed at night and apply cold wet cloths to his shin bones to relieve the pain therein. After our ship was put into good repair, a quantity of copper bolts, presented as part of a cargo from Toulon, intended for building the French navy, which was to be landed at Marseilles, these we agreed to load with Smith's coal to make up a cargo. The 14th of November, 1787, we sailed for Marseilles, and experienced very turbulent weather and contrary winds in getting to the southward. On the 23rd, we saw a number of grampuses sporting themselves. They are a species of whale. Towards the latter end of November, we experienced heavy thunder and lightning with incessant rain. On the 5th of November, we passed Cape Trafalgar, and the day following we were near Gibraltar. The 9th, being off Cape de Gaté, and a levanter, or strong easterly gale blowing, we ran in Almeria Bay and anchored with the best bower in 20 fathoms, in order to veer out all the new cable and give it a good washing and stretching. Many captains are so careful of their best cable as to preserve it dry as long as possible, and trusting to this, when they have let their best bower anchor go in a roadstead, have been much surprised to find the cable snap off before the ship was brought up, by its being dry rotten. But it was our custom to wet the cables often with salt water, even when crossing the Western Ocean, which, by long experience, I have found to preserve them from the injury of the dry rot, and from the fresh water draining from seamen's wet clothes after rain. The 12th of December we sailed for the eastward. The 19th passed Cape Dragon and entered the Gulf of Lions. This is a very blusterous and dangerous navigation, and in strong gales the sea runs short and irregular, which does much damage to shipping. As soon as we rounded Cape Dragon, at intervals we were becalmed, and at other times we were much annoyed with whirlwinds, formed first on the Pyrenean mountains, at parts of France from Spain, and then poured down into the Gulf with accumulating violence. We have seen the sea all of foam between us and the land with these squalls, while our ship was without an air of wind. While the day continued, by looking out sharply, we did pretty well, but at midnight we were attacked by one of the squalls which, as fast as we secured one sail, another was required to be taken in, until we were reduced to a very low sail. At daylight we found ourselves very near the land, and the water much discolored, but by carrying a good press of sail, we entered the port of Marseilles in the morning of the 20th, and in the course of 5 minutes' time from our entrance, we found our ship landlocked in one of the snuggest harbors I have ever been in, being like a large floating dock surrounded by houses. Having anchored, our master repaired to the health office, but as he had neglected to procure a bill of health at Liverpool, which is always demanded in the European side of the Mediterranean, we were ordered into quarantine at the entrance of the Mole. On Sunday, the 23rd, at daylight, some officers came on board to smoke our crew, the whole of which was ordered into the steerage, where a fire was made, into which was thrown some drugs which made a great smoke. No light, fire, or smoking tobacco was allowed on board here, which was unpleasant some cold days, on which the gentlemen on shore wore muffs in the street. The crew of the French vessels were badly fed. I do not recollect their having any meat, but fed on fish, and I have seen shellfish for their dinner known in England by the name of sea eggs. When our boat arrived here, her bottom was white-painted, but on being hoisted out, the salt water in this mole was so corrupt that it turned the paint black. The person put on board to prevent smuggling was a soldier. One night, being inclined to desert his post to avoid detection, he got one of our seamen to put on his topcoat and hat to walk the deck with, giving strict orders how to behave when the patrol passed the ship. He accordingly went and returned to the vessel undetected. On one side of the mole was the promenade, well filled on Sabbath afternoons with people of all ranks and degrees. My attention was attracted by a man with a table, on which was a small brass cannon, birds, etc. A goldfinch was now dressed like a soldier with a grenadier's cap. A lighted match was then given to him, and at the word of command discharged the gun, and did not appear to mind the report, which was as great as from a dueling pistol. The man then addressed his audience, informing them that he had on sale a preparation for killing vermin in the head. Many people were busy roasting chestnuts for sale, piping hot. The mall being now filled, I paraded amongst them, and was not a little disgusted to behold the ladies, young and old, so strongly painted and their faces so disfigured that I scarcely saw a handsome woman amongst them. I was much pleased with the marble fountains here, being well executed in various forms and elegant figures. This is a noted place for cordials, also for artificial fruits and flowers. I purchased a plate of the former, well executed in marble, for about 5 shillings, consisting of a peach, nectarine, lemon, apple, peas, and 2 figs. Near our vessel, at the head of the mole, the fishing boats landed their cargoes. I had, therefore, an opportunity of observing that the female dealers in this article were not at all deficient in loquacity and virulence from the sisterhood on our side of the water. Their language was neither French nor Italian, but a confused mixture of both languages. The captain had lost his respectability entirely with the crew by familiarity, and I now found it necessary to keep a tight rein on them, that they might feel who was their master. They were much inclined to visit the cordial shops on shore, to prevent which I kept them close at work from daylight till after dark, which made them lodge a complaint with the captain against me. But he thought it prudent to say little to me on the subject, especially as I not only did equal work with them through the day, but had to sit up for him occasionally to a late hour at night, especially when he was at the masquerade until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. A young English gentleman of good family, and who had been traveling through France and Italy, was now here, and understanding that our ship was intending to proceed to Sicily, engaged to take his passage with us, and sent on board 7 hogsheads of red wine as an adventure. As we now had a numerous quantity of rats on board, many of which probably came on board here, as the French ships were honeycombed with them, our captain was determined to suffocate them with charcoal. Having got our victuals for the day on deck, we lighted our fires, and then closed the hatchways, which were opened again at sunset. Having to sleep below gave me a violent headache next day, but we got clear of all the rats except one. Our passenger had continued hitherto on shore, for some private reasons, but was now fetched by our captain. We therefore got under way for Sicily, unknown to his landlord, to whom I believe he was much in arrears. Having now rounded Sardinia, we steered for the island of Marittimo, near Trapano in Sicily. The wind being contrary and blowing strong, we did not get in with Sicily till the 18th, and then got on a lee shore, which obliged us to carry a press of sail until 3 p.m., at which time we weathered away Columbra, and brought to an anchor in Trapano Bay. The 19th, as the wind was strong, we unbent the sails, struck our lower yards, and got the topsail yards fore and aft in the tops, this being an open bay with little shelter. Our ship's company was now ordered on shore to the health office, leaving the ship to the mercy of the Sicilians. Great care was taken on our landing to prevent anyone touching our clothes, as the place was formerly nearly depopulated by the plague. In calling a man named Peacock, they pronounced it Picaco, but at Marseilles his name contracted to Pico. After due examination, we were admitted to Fredrick or free communication with the shore. Our captain now struck a bargain for a cargo of sea salt at about 7 shillings 6 pennies per ton. The proprietor was a Sicilian baron, and as our passenger, Mr. W.R.L., was perfect in the Italian language, from long residence at Rome and other parts of Italy, the transaction was easily accomplished. Bad weather prevented us from working till the 21st, when we began to deliver our ballast into shore boats. One afternoon, Mr. W.L. invited the baron's lady and daughters on board, and our boat was dispatched for them at the time appointed. They brought several attendants with them, wearing long swords, and wished to have some punch, but our captain kept a miserable table and had no kind of spirit on board. Fortunately, I had 2 gallons of brandy, which I offered, and the punch was made. The whole company appeared voracious, eating quickly whatever was set before them. Even the sugar was devoured, and there was no ceremony whilst eating between the principals and domestics. About sunset they were landed, but to the great disgrace of one of the daughters, our tars discovered that she had many holes in her stockings. The inhabitants of this place appeared indigent and slothful. Their bread was the sweetest I ever ate, and of a yellow color. This being a noted place for cameos and intaglios, our passenger purchased a few of the former for about 4 shillings 6 pennies each, about the size to set in a ring for the finger, and which were admirably well executed. Our captain purchased a pair of stone bracelets, and got an imitation of a locket done in the same materials, on which were figures of 2 of his children in hair. I was informed that a roughish English captain once laying in this bay, and he, having discovered on shore a neglected heap of valuable marble ruins, made free to transport them to his ship, and as no one had authority here to stop his proceedings, a courier was dispatched to Palermo for instructions, and as several days elapsed before the messenger returned, the captain had finished the business and had departed from the island. The 29th we unmoored and hoisted in the longboat, and sailed on the 1st of March, 1788, for Philadelphia. Having a fresh gale from the southeast, we passed the island of Marittimo about 10 in the morning. This island was formerly a residence for Sicilian convicts. Before night the wind became contrary, or, according to the sea term, right in our teeth. The 16th of March we experienced hail, rain, thunder, lightning, waterspouts, and strong gales, and on some days were incommoded with whirlwinds. The 27th we reached Cape de Gat, off which the current, always running into the Mediterranean, begins to be sensibly felt in foul westerly gales. This sea is frequented by many logger-headed turtles, which sleep on the surface in fine weather. Some of these were taken up by the boat, but from ignorance and in not throwing away the fat, which is hurtful, many of our people were made sick. The Italians are so expert in catching this animal that a man will swim to it when discovered asleep, and by taking hold of its shoulders and laying on its hind part, leaving the fins at liberty, the turtle will carry the man to the vessel, he steering its course. The 6th of April, 1788, we anchored in Gibraltar Bay. Soon after, the health officer came alongside, and, for fear of catching the plague, received our bill of health in a split stick. A strong levanteur was now blowing, and Mount Calpe, above the town, was enveloped in clouds. We had, from ignorance, anchored where the remains of the Due d'Aquilon's celebrated armada was deposited in the year 1782, which did our cable no good. The Moors, who generally supply this garrison with provisions, were at this time in open hostility, which made the passing through the straits dangerous, and as we were unarmed, our captain came to a resolution that should a Barbary corsair approach us, as we passed Tangier, to endeavor to give her our stem, or run over her, as there was a strong breeze suitable for that purpose. The 7th of April, having obtained our refreshments, we sailed for Gibraltar, and were given to understand that the Southampton frigate was cruising to the southwards of Cape Spartel to watch the motions of the Moors, which gave us some hopes of escaping from those infidels. The wind continued fair for several days, which gave us a good run to the westward. I will now give a short account of Mr. W.R.L., our passenger, received on board at Marseilles. He was a young man of good family, about 26 years of age, and finished his education at Cambridge. But instead of improving the acquirements obtained there for his eternal interest, he, like many more at the seat of learning, spent his precious hours with profligate companions in midnight scenes of riot and dissipation. How he spent his time after he left the university I know not. but his father resided not far from Bedford Square in London, and probably he lived with him. When he had left the cliffs of Dover, he had a lady of rank under his protection, with whom he traveled through France and Italy. But she, being displeased with his conduct in a certain place, parted from him and settled in the city of Florence. At Rome he carried on an intrigue with a young lady of noble family, having got a key made to let himself into the palace at night. But this affair being discovered, the lady was placed in a nunnery. He afterwards dressed himself in woman's clothes and endeavored to gain admittance. Having rung a bell, a lay sister presented herself at the grate, with whom he conversed with ease. But when the lady abbess made her appearance, he became intimidated and could not recollect the Italian language. His failure in this soon laid open his person and business to the abbess, who told him that should he attempt to gain admission the second time, she would have him secured. He therefore withdrew in confusion. After this, he was informed that the brother of the lady intended to assassinate him, and was advised to quit Rome, which he did. He passed on to Naples, and then to Sicily, where he visited Mount Etna, a description of which he related to me, but it is not to be compared with Dryden's representation. He, on leaving this island, returned to Italy, but his father's dishonoring his drafts, he repaired to Marseilles, with what view I know not, but believe he was very short of money when he agreed for his passage. He possessed a number of valuable prints and curiosities laid in during his travels in Italy, and had 2 sets of coat buttons made of 2 sorts of lava. He had also laid out some money in Italian books, especially in the works of the Italian dramatic author Metastasio, which he would sometimes read to me in English. It was his intention on arrival in America, should he fail of employment, to proceed to the Indian nations, but for what purpose I could not learn. But Providence had designed that his talents should be otherwise employed. On our passage to America, our sails were often out of repair, and as I was the principal sewer of canvas, I was kept much at work, both in the tops and on deck, in mending and shifting cloths in the sails. Our captain spent much of his time in card-playing with the crew, both day and night, in which Mr. W. often joined, but they never could prevail on me to associate familiarly with the seamen, as I was well aware that by doing so I should lose my respectability. The captain also played at heads and tails with halfpence, an apprentice boy being his chief companion, and whatever he gained at gambling from the crew appeared at their debit in his account book as money advanced, and this was the conduct of a man apparently verging on the age of 50. The 28th of April we hoisted out the boat and secured a turtle asleep, which weighed 76 pounds, and on the same day caught a dolphin. Many days we experienced severe gales with heavy rain, thunder, and lightning, and on the 24th of May got soundings in 36 fathoms. The next day we saw Cape May and received a pilot on board. The 26th we got into the Delaware, and in 2 days more reached Philadelphia. The gambling being carried on after the pilot came on board caused him to remark privately to me that, though he was a man in years, he never saw a captain so degrade himself before. As we passed by the wharves, being hailed, we replied that we came from Trapani, but as no one knew such a place, they imagined we meant Tripoli, and began to fear the plague. And after the captain landed, he was ordered by the health officer to remove the ship below the town to lay quarantine, but we were soon permitted to haul to a wharf. The Delaware River is famous for sturgeon. Many we saw leaping out of the water on our passage from the sea. Some of them will weigh many hundreds, and a shipbuilder here informed me that he once saw a fishhawk pounce on a sturgeon and fix his claws so firmly in the back of the fish that he was drawn under water. Small fish, such as perch, dace, etc., were so plentiful alongside the wharves that women with a basket, baited at bottom with any animal substance, and let down to the bottom of the wharves, might catch any quantity wanted. The 7 hogsheads of wine belonging to Mr. W.L. were now landed, 2 of which were given to our captain instead of money for his passage. One day I observed an old gentleman in the street who attracted my attention by having round his neck what I concluded to be a gold chain, and was afterwards given to understand that he was no other than the celebrated Benjamin Franklin, late ambassador for the United States to the court of Versailles. The second mate of our ship was a middle-aged man, married in Whitehaven, with a family grown up. He had been many years master of a vessel in the coal trade from that port, but turning out a tippler, he lost his vessel and credit. A woman having often called on board here with shoes for sale, I was not a little surprised one day at being informed that our second mate had taken her to wife and had left our ship. A few days after this, one of our crew saw the wife hawking about her husband's old Greenland boots for sale. Having delivered our salt, and no eligible freight presenting for Europe, our ship was chartered by Mr. P.B. to load flour and lumber for Kingston, Jamaica. I hope you enjoyed this episode from the Journal of Samuel Kelly. Please like, subscribe, and follow on whatever platform you're listening. Be sure to check out the description to see how you can support this project and others. And tune in next time for more from the Journal of Samuel Kelly.